every Thursday afternoon, just before the first black cars rolled into the parking lot. Naomi Bell locked the side door of the funeral home sewing room and pulled another garment beneath the yellow lamp. Sometimes it was a boy's suit jacket, with sleeves too long for his wrists. Sometimes it was a widow's dress, with a torn seam hidden near the waist. Sometimes it was a shirt so old and thin that one more pull of the needle could have turned grief into embarrassment. People in town called it kindness. They said Naomi had the hands of a saint and the silence of a woman who understood sorrow better than most pastors. What they did not know was that Naomi Bell did not mend funeral clothes because she was soft. She did it because 18 years earlier, when her own son lay in a casket under cheap church lights, his suit did not fit, his collar sat wrong against his neck, and nobody in that town had found the time, skill, or willingness to fix it before the lid closed. She had promised him then, with both hands pressed against the coffin edge, that no other mother would have to stand there noticing the wrong thing forever. Naomi was 53 now, narrow-shouldered, dark-haired except for the silver at her temples, and precise in a way that made younger people around her nervous. She worked in the basement tailoring room of Whitmore and Sons Funeral Home, where she steamed jackets, pinned hems, and repaired what grief did not have the energy to repair itself. Her official job title was wardrobe attendant, but the title sounded cleaner than the truth. What she really did was protect families from the extra humiliation that comes when death arrives before money, before preparation, before dignity has had time to dress itself. If stories about grief, promises, and the small acts people never forget pull you in, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you think the smallest details matter more on the worst days of our lives? Whitmore and Sons stood at the edge of town beside a row of sycamores that lost their leaves all at once. Every November, the building was older than the highway and carried the permanent scent of polished wood. Old lilies and air conditioning set 1 degree to cold. Naomi had worked there for 9 years. Before that, she took in alterations from her kitchen table, hemming prom dresses and church skirts for women who spoke softly around her, because everybody knew, in the way towns always know, that something terrible had once happened in her house and never fully left it. The funeral home owner, Grant Whitmore, hired her after seeing how she repaired a burial dress in less than an hour for a family who could not afford replacement fabric. "You saved them from one more thing to cry about," he had told her. Naomi almost answered, "No. I just changed where the crying would land." She kept that to herself. Owen Mercer, Grant's nephew, was the only person in the building who did not understand her at first. He came in that spring after business school with polished shoes, rolled sleeves, and opinions about efficiency that still smelled new. Owen was 31 and had the kind of face that had never had to ask for patience twice. Grant brought him into the business because someone had to learn the books before the old man died over them. Owen learned quickly. He also noticed that some clothing jobs were disappearing from the system. At first, he assumed it was sloppy paperwork. Then, he assumed theft of labor. Then, because youth often mistakes suspicion for intelligence, he decided Naomi Bell had been quietly giving away company services for months. He approached her one Thursday just after lunch, while she was pinning the sleeves of a navy suit no more expensive than a week's groceries. "You forgot to enter this one," he said, tapping the work card. Naomi did not look up. "No." Owen waited. "Then why is there no charge code?" "Because there's no charge." That irritated him more than denial would have. "You can't just decide that." Naomi clipped a thread with her teeth and finally raised her eyes. "I just did." He laughed once, without humor. "That may work when my uncle is around to romanticize it, but there's still a business here." Naomi turned the suit sleeve inside out. "And there's still a dead boy upstairs whose mother borrowed gas money to get here." "That isn't the point." "No," Naomi said. "It usually isn't, for people who haven't stood where she's standing." He left angry, which was not unusual for people who met her before. They understood what kind of silence she had earned. That evening, while Naomi finished the navy suit, she heard the family arrive upstairs. Slow footsteps, a child crying once and then choking it back. The unmistakable wobble in a father's voice when he tries to say thank you too early. She carried the suit upstairs herself. The boy in the casket looked 12, too tall for his age and too still for any age. His mother, a red-eyed woman in a grocery store uniform, touched the sleeve Naomi had finished and whispered, "It fits him now." Not "it fits. It fits him now." as if death had interrupted the sentence, and Naomi had only repaired a fragment of the grammar. The woman reached for her purse. Naomi touched her wrist lightly. "No." The woman stared at her, confused first, then close to breaking. "Please," she said, "I don't want charity." Naomi looked at the boy's small polished shoes and said the line she always used when she needed mercy to leave the room with its dignity intact. "It was only thread." The woman cried then, not loudly, not beautifully, just honestly, and Owen Mercer, standing unnoticed in the doorway with a stack of forms, saw every second of it. He said nothing, but something in his face changed. Not enough. Not yet. Just the first crack. The next week he started watching more carefully. A black dress altered for a woman whose husband died on a roofing job. A church suit repaired for an older man burying his brother. A little pink hair ribbon sewn onto a toddler's burial dress, because the mother had forgotten to bring one and kept apologizing as if forgetting ribbon were the thing she should feel guilty for. Again and again, Naomi found quiet ways to remove one more humiliation from the day. Again and again, the families left with relief on their faces they did not quite understand how to name. By Friday, Owen had stopped using the word improper in his head. He started using the word intentional. That was more dangerous, because intention asks bigger questions. He came back down to the basement the following Tuesday, carrying a garment bag and a thinner voice. "My aunt said this came in for Thursday," he said. "Young man, motorcycle accident." Naomi unzipped the bag. Gray suit. Off the rack. Inexpensive lining. The pants were at least 2 inches too long. "She buy this in a hurry?" Naomi asked. Owen nodded. "How can you tell?" "Because she bought him a suit for a funeral instead of using the one he owned. Mothers only do that when the last thing they put him in has too much life left on it." Owen stood very still. Then he said, "Did you always talk like this?" "No," Naomi replied. "Before my son died, I talked like everybody else." The room changed after that. Not dramatically. Owen did not suddenly become wise, but the word son hung there long enough to make him curious in a less selfish way. He leaned against the table. "You never talk about him." Naomi kept working. "There's a reason. That doesn't mean I shouldn't ask." "It might." Owen hesitated. "Did something happen with funeral clothes?" The needle stopped in Naomi's hand. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the old vent rattling above the door. Tensi Said. His name was Eli. It was the first time Owen had heard or volunteered anything personal. He was 15. School band. Terrible at math. Better at making people think he wasn't paying attention than actually not paying attention. He died in May. Car accident. Rain on the highway. Wrong place, wrong speed, wrong second. Her voice had not gone soft. If anything, it had become more exact. The day before visitation, I found the suit my sister had bought him for confirmation. Navy. Good wool. But he'd grown that spring and the shoulders sat wrong and the sleeves rode up half an inch too far. I could have fixed it myself if I'd had my machine. But mine had broken 2 weeks before, and the repairman said Monday. Owen said nothing. Naomi resumed pinning the hem without looking at him. I went to 3 shops. One had closed. One said they were full. One woman told me she was sorry, but rush work cost extra, and she had a wedding order to finish first. At that, she finally looked up. Do you know what happens to a mother's mind when her son is dead upstairs, and a stranger tells her that a bride comes before a burial? Owen swallowed. Naomi answered for him. It becomes a room she never leaves completely. She turned the suit trouser over and pressed the crease flat. I stood beside Eli's coffin for 4 hours, noticing his sleeves. Every prayer, every hug, every flower, every fuzz beyond all of it. I kept seeing those sleeves. Too short. Not much. Just enough. Owen's eyes had gone red in that embarrassed way men try to hide by blinking less. That sounds small, Naomi said. It wasn't. Because grief clings to whatever detail it can survive through. Some women remember the hymn. I remember the cloth at my son's wrists. Now, he understood. Not all of it, but enough to stop asking the wrong questions. "I'm sorry," he said. Naomi gave the tiniest nod. "Sorry is what people say when they have no useful tools left. Sometimes that's honest enough." That Thursday, the motorcycle victim's mother came in wearing a blouse buttoned wrong at the cuff. Owen saw it before Naomi did, and, without being told, found a quiet room, a glass of water, and an extra chair. When the woman asked how much the alterations cost, Naomi opened her mouth. Owen spoke first. Nothing. It was already being handled. Naomi looked at him. He did not look back. That night, after the family left, she found him downstairs, entering inventory. "You lied," she said. Owen kept typing. "No." I adjusted the record. "With whose authority?" He met her eyes then. "I'm learning that authority and permission are not the same thing." That almost made her smile. Almost. Word spread in town, though not the truth of Eli, not yet. Only that Whitmore's had become the place where poor families were treated gently, where clothes were fixed without public shame, where nobody said, "Can you still pay?" before asking what was needed. People called Naomi generous. She let them. Generosity was easier for others to witness than penance. One November afternoon, a woman named Celia Navarro brought in a boy's charcoal suit, one size too large for the body it would clothe. She was burying her brother, who had raised her after their mother vanished into addiction. The suit belonged to Celia's 16-year-old son, and she wanted it altered because my little brother always joked the kid looked more serious in a suit than any man at church. Naomi pinned the shoulders while Celia stood nearby, arms folded so tightly it looked painful. "He never owned one of his own," Celia said suddenly. Naomi nodded. "People think the dead stop needing dignity. They don't." "No," Naomi said. "They don't." Celia watched her for a second, then asked the question no one had asked in years. "Who are you doing this for?" The answer rose, before Naomi could stop it. "My son." Celia did not say, "Sorry, thank God." She only nodded once, the way women do when they recognize another woman speaking from the room she never fully left. When Celia came to collect the suit, she placed an envelope on the counter. Naomi pushed it back. Celia pushed it forward again. "For someone else's boy," she said. That was how it started. Quietly. No fundraiser. No speech. No plaque. Just a thin envelope in a drawer marked thread. Then another family added $20. They couldn't really spare. Then a widower left $32 and a note that read for the next shirt. Then Father Miguel from St. Agnes sent over $200 in cash, with instructions not to mention him because public goodness made him itch. By winter, there was enough in the drawer to cover 3 families without Naomi having to pretend it was only thread. Owen kept the books. He never once called it a charity fund. He labeled the line item simply, Eli. One snowy evening, while they closed up after a visitation for a retired dockworker, Owen asked the question he had avoided since June. "Do you think your son would want this?" Naomi was steaming a black tie and did not answer at first. Finally, she said, "No child asks to become the reason grief gets useful, but usefulness is all I can make out of what happened now." Owen nodded slowly. "That's not really an answer. It's the only honest one." Then, because the room had already become dangerous enough for truth, she added, "If he'd lived, he'd be maybe married, maybe not, maybe terrible at rent, maybe kind. I don't know." Grief makes imaginations into bad historians. The next spring, Whitmore and Sons handled the funeral of a local councilman's wife. Large crowd, good flowers, expensive clothes that still needed adjusting because money does not prevent terrible timing. Upstairs, polished people filled the chapel. Downstairs, Naomi repaired a seam no one would ever notice if she did her work correctly. That was when the woman from the third tailor shop walked into the sewing room. Older now, softer around the eyes. Naomi recognized her immediately. The woman looked at her namatag, then at the machine, then back at her face. Recognition arrived a second later and far more heavily. "Oh," she said. Naomi kept sewing. "I remember you," the woman whispered. "I know." The woman clasped her handbag too tightly. "About your boy's suit." Naomi cut the thread cleanly. Yes, I was cruel. No, Naomi said. You were busy. The woman looked confused, almost hurt. That's worse. Cruelty, at least, notices the wound it makes. Silence filled the room. Then the woman did something Naomi had not expected. She took an envelope from her purse and set it on the table beside the machine. For the drawer, she said. Naomi looked at it but did not touch it. The woman's voice broke. I have thought about you at every funeral since. Naomi finally met her eyes. Good, she said softly. Then something useful came out of it for both of us. After she left, Naomi opened the envelope. $500. No note. No signature. Just an amount large enough to say, I have counted this for years. She put it in the drawer without a word. By the second anniversary of the drawer, 27 families had buried their dead in clothing that fit because of Eli. Most of them never knew his name. Naomi preferred it that way. Some debts should not become public monuments. They should become quiet structures that hold strangers up when their own beams crack. On the 18th anniversary of Eli's death, Naomi closed the shop early and walked alone to the cemetery outside town. She brought no flowers, only a folded white dress shirt, child-sized, that she had altered for a family who could not pay that morning. She stood over the grave and laid the shirt there for a moment before taking it back. I kept the promise, she said. No thunder, no revelation, only wind moving through the cypress and the faraway sound of traffic, too busy to know what was being said among the stones. That evening she returned to the shop, opened the drawer, and found Owen standing there with his coat still on. I was thinking, he said, a phrase that always made her suspicious. Dangerous habits. He held up a brass nameplate no larger than a hand. ELI Fund. Naomi stared at it for a long time. Then she shook her head. No. Owen frowned. Why? Because this isn't about making grief visible. It's about making it useful. He looked at the plate again, then at her. You really don't want anyone to know. That depends on what parte understood. The plate went back in his pocket. If anyone had asked Naomi what finally changed in her after all those years, she would not have said healing. Healing was too neat a word for a wound that still lived at the edge of certain fabrics and certain church lights. She would have said this. Some promises are too small to save the person you made them to, but they can still save other people from standing where you once stood, noticing the wrong thing forever. And if this story stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you think grief becomes lighter when it helps someone else? Or does it simply learn how to stand differently?